So now in the new article, we've got dyslexia, new synergy between education and cognitive neuroscience. Why would it be potentially a good idea to study dyslexia if we're talking about reading and cognitive neuroscience? Why would it be a good idea to do this? What do we know about dyslexia? What is dyslexia? What is dyslexia? Kate, would you be able to share? What do you, when you think of somebody who has dyslexia?
It's difficulty learning to read, so sometimes when they read a word, their brain mixes up the letters or will switch letters.
And so there's a cognitive dysfunction going on, and you use the word, what word, in their brain. So this is one of those studies where we might gain some insight into cognitive neuroscience. Now, this is a little more on the clinical side because it's a disorder, but we might be able to gain a little more insight to how the brain is working in the cognitive neuroscience at the end here by going through this. So let's actually, I know I told you to read the abstract here, but let's actually start off with, as the article says, what is dyslexia? So when you think of dyslexia, you reverse letters. What else happens? People are familiar with dyslexia. What else happens in dyslexia? Ashante, do you know anything about dyslexia when you hear dyslexia?
I know that sometimes letters can be mistaken for numbers.
Say again?
Sometimes letters can be mistaken for numbers.
So letters can be mistaken as numbers. They're just not processed correctly. Go ahead, Bella.
Reading out loud can be kind of difficult.
Reading out loud can be kind of difficult.
The processing of the words and then translating that so you say it out loud, sometimes there's confusion.
So there's kind of a breakdown in the system. Brittany, would you add anything to that?
No, I was going to say exactly that.
Yeah, reversing letters, not having comprehension. So this is a study or just kind of a little review article that says we can actually learn something about cognitive neuroscience and reading by looking at dyslexia. So they kind of have on the bottom of 280 the definition of what is dyslexia. You have trouble. Notice that word there. I'm going to underline it here. Logographic. What does the word logographic mean? Those are kind of the individual letters, if you will, and how they make a word. So you have problems with that. They don't read a lot outside of the class sometimes, and they just can't learn this behavior. It's just a very difficult behavior to learn. The question is it all a cognitive deficit? Are there actually brain things that are causing this to occur? And if you look at this particular article on page 282, I believe it is. So if we can study this, maybe we can learn a little bit about it. They kind of get to the idea that there do seem to be some brain problems. They do neuroimaging, and even if, actually maybe it would be a good time to go back to the abstract here. What kind of studies do they do? Do they do ERPs here? Are they doing ERPs here in the abstract?
No, they do neuroimaging.
Yeah, neuroimaging is going on, so they're looking at the brains and they're seeing there's a problem in the temporal lobe. That word functional plasticity, that's kind of an important word. Does anybody know what that means? Let me give you an example of functional plasticity. Hello, how you doing today? Why was that functional plasticity? What did I just do there?
If you do more than one thing,
What's that?
you're able to do multiple tasks.
Multiple tasks at the same time. Hop on one foot. How are you doing today? Vocally saying that. So plasticity is the ability to do lots of things simultaneously. And basically what it's saying here is if you have dyslexia, you have problems with this. And it appears that the left temporal parietal lobe isn't working right, and that really causes some lack of functional plasticity. Young children are at risk of this. Maybe teaching practices can be done to help people out. So on 282, can you help people with this? Practice is always good. Learning how to read letters and turn them into words. I was actually watching, has anybody seen the movie A League of Their Own? Good movie. The gal wants to know if she's on the roster. And does anybody remember what happens when she goes up to the board and the manager just says, go and look and see if your name is there?
She can't read.
She can't read.
She didn't learn to read.
So learning how to read is a process. It's a learned process. So they can look at the brain in these areas. They do see alterations in the temporal parietal lobe. And this probably disrupts part of the biology of understanding words. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And I think that kind of covers that particular article for us. Let's move on, if we can, to the next article. Visual processing of multiple elements in the dyslexic brain. Let me put it on pause here and have you kind of read through the abstract here. With that being said, so let me kind of walk you through the visual processing of multiple elements in the dyslexic brain, evidence for superior parietal dysfunction. The title, is this a cognitive piece of research or is this a cognitive neuroscience piece of research? Why would you say cognitive neuroscience, Madison?
Because it's using MRI to measure parietal activity when they're reading.
Bingo, it's using an MRI technique to measure what's going on during reading when you have dyslexia and are there things going wrong with the brain. So that's the main idea here. So they look at various things here and they find basically reduced parietal activity, problems in the occipital temporal lobe. They find some hemispheric problems as well. So we've kind of got that in the abstract. Where else could we go and see kind of the main conclusions of this article? We don't need to read the method and results and all those things. Where could we go to cheat? The discussion. So we can go to the beginning of the discussion here. And if we do that, what page is that on? There we go. Looks like on page 10, functional MRI. So as people were processing things, healthy, skilled readers, and dyslexics. Why is it good to actually have both of these groups? Yeah, and probably do a little t-test to see the differences, see what normal people do. Reduced performance of dyslexics on 6-letter processing. There was a problem, as it said, in the brain. The temporal parietal areas of the brain were going wrong here. Occipital parietal as well. So this is one of those just cognitive neuroscience studies that's looking at the brain region. If you look at the bottom of page 11, there seem to be a lot of problems in the brain structures. That the real key question here is it actually a brain dysfunction that causes a cognitive deficit, or is it what? So is it biologically based, and then it causes the cognitive problems, or what? Is dyslexia what? Just a problem you're having that leads to brain difficulties. So it's sometimes hard to determine if it's the brain causing these disruptions or if it's a cognitive deficit that's shown in the brain. So cause effect is kind of difficult, although we do believe there is a biological basis, but there might be different types of dyslexia. Do people know people have trouble just reading and that just started happening? So that might be more developmental delays. But the neuroanatomy there does have strong indications that this goes on. Last but not least, what I wanted to do with you as I look at, if we're still recording here, we are. Eye tracking technology in the study of autism. Just a little bit. This is a little off the course with issues here, but what do you guys know? Do people in the class have an interest in autism? What do we know about autism? What is autism?
There's a spectrum for one.
There's a spectrum of autism-related disorders, but generally speaking, what are some of the characteristics somebody has autism?
I worked with a little guy over the summer who was on the autism spectrum, and he had difficulties with like eye contact, didn't like loud noises.
Loud noises, eye contact. Anything else people know about autism?
It depends on where on the spectrum they are. So like they can be high functioning and they just have like little quirks about them that are different, or they can be on the low functioning end and then it's worse with like cognitive delays and they can't take care of themselves.
So cognitive delays, self-care, even sometimes
My brother has autism, so.
banging of one's head. Does that happen with autism sometimes?
My brother doesn't, he's high functioning, so he just like he'll focus in on things. So like when he was younger, he really liked Thomas the Train, and so he only liked Thomas the Train. So he watched Thomas the Train, he played with Thomas the Train, so that's how he was. But he's really high functioning, and he's really smart. Like he's really good at spelling. Like
So very good at particular tasks, but in the
Yeah.
lower functioning realms, I think sometimes we get some head banging going on and some other things. So that's dyslexia. In this particular study, what can we learn from eye tracking about the study of autism? So once again, if we look at things here, recent studies have extended its use. They look at high functioning autism and processing social information and offer some insights into what people may experience. And once again, if you just go to the end of the paper, summary and future directions, people with autism look at social stimuli differently. They look less at the eye region of the face. They have found increased fixations. Eye tracking has shown that these things are going on. So you can use eye tracking to actually see what's going on, potentially with diminished eye fixations. You can look at brain waves probably as well, but we didn't do that here. But I just wanted to put this before you to studying eye tracking. So let's finish things off here by just kind of summarizing what we've talked about today. Today's discussion has been a discussion about what topic? Language, specifically what component of language? Reading research. And so with reading research, the idea is we have saccades, we have fixations. Keith Rayner started it off. Now we know a lot about predictability, word frequency, discourse processing, lexical ambiguities. So you should know this information and where it goes. And then we talked about cognitive neuroscience and waves in the brain and dysfunctions and using eye trackers for autism, for reading, and what they might show in the future. Cause-effect is a very difficult thing to get at. There's a lot of this, and let me give you a little preview of our class on Thursday to wrap things up. So on Thursday when we meet, I think I've already set that up. So what we're going to talk about is more specific information with speech perception. We talked very generally about it, but we're going to kind of go into the micro levels, and I want to point out even now, Canine. Cindy Canine was studying acoustics and speech perception and actually married Albrecht Inhofe. And guess where they decided to set up their research laboratories? Binghamton, New York. So guess who was on my dissertation committee? Cindy was studying speech perception. Albrecht was doing word recognition, but some of Cindy's work, especially working with Indiana University people, was groundbreaking. So we're going to talk about speech perception in very specific ways and it's going to kind of be a little trip for me down memory lane. But when you come to class on Thursday, have your computers. We'll review things as well. The other thing I'll point out for you here is once I left my clapping lab, my psychoacoustics lab, the guy who came after me, the graduate student, his name was Michael Hall. And guess what Michael decided to do with his psychoacoustic career? Stay in the field. So he's still doing this at James Madison University. And that's just kind of how the game works. So we'll cover this. Bring your books in for the next class. We'll review and get ready for the test. And that'll cover it for the day. Thank you, everyone.